What is the single thing that you can do to improve your grade the most in the AP Physics exam? The answer is give yourself a practice exam. There are so many benefits to doing a practice exam. Studies have gone and looked at students that have done the best in many exams in many different courses and consistently found that the students that practice and do practice exams get the best grades. In this video, I'm going to talk about 4 reasons practicing exam is so good and helpful. And at the end of the video, I'm going to talk about 4 places that you can go to find practice exams. Many students want to begin studying by looking over notes and reading. They've done a whole year and they want to refresh the ideas in their mind, and then they might move on to doing some practice questions in the different topics and finish with all that study under their belt by doing a practice exam or 2. I want to tell you that this is the reverse order of the right thing to do. You want to start off your study and your intensive study by doing a practice exam or 2 and then go to practice questions in particular topics. You only want to go look at notes if there are holes that you need to learn more about. I want you to think about boxing as a metaphor. I did boxing for a little while, and there's different ways to learn how to do boxing. You can actually learn about boxing through looking at videos or listening to somebody talk about it. You need to learn things like where to put your hands and what to do. You can also learn about boxing and getting better at boxing by doing some practicing. So you can go to a punching bag and punch the bag and do the one that is this one. And also physical training exercise is very important. The third thing you can do to practice boxing is spar. And that's where you actually go into a ring and fight somebody else. It may be a slightly different environment than a real boxing match. And the question is, which of these 3 is the most helpful for preparing you for a boxing fight? And the answer is sparring is by far the most helpful. It's by far the most helpful. Watching videos is okay. That can teach you something. And certainly training is going to be very, very helpful. It's going to get your muscles organized in the right way. But there's something about sparring that teaches you what it's like to be in a fight that those other 2 things cannot do. And you learn things like the pacing of what a fight is like, what feeling exhausted is like, and how to overcome emotionally in a fight that you can only do by sparring. This is a metaphor for what it's like to do studying for physics. And a sparring is just like doing a practice exam. There are 4 reasons why doing a practice exam is going to help you get a better grade. The first is the breadth of question topic. In AP Physics, there's 8 different topics, and it's quite a lot of material to learn in 1 year. And it feels kind of overwhelming when you sit down and sort of read through one topic and do some practice questions and do that 8 times. When you go to the AP Physics exam or practice exam, you're kind of in the wild, as I call it. There's all the topics mixed up together and you don't know what they are. And it actually doesn't feel quite so intimidating as trying to cram everything into your head. And what happens is you get exposed to the breadth of different topics in the way that they're going to be asked. It can be easy to focus too much on one topic and not enough on another, or it can be easy to understand one thing well and not another thing well. And it's hard to understand what to do when you're just reading through everything. But when you sit down and do a practice exam, you get exposed to the breadth of questions as they are in the exam. Each exam is going to be slightly different, but very similar in the mix of questions and topics that they're going to be exposing you to. The second reason is the breadth of question style. So AP Physics emphasizes understanding over calculation. And there are these tricky kinds of questions where they're really pushing you to say, do you get this topic well? And there's a number of ways they ask questions that are very similar to each other. And you want to get exposed to those ways of asking questions. So for example, on the FRQ, there are the experimental questions that they ask regularly. There are energy bar questions that they ask regularly, and many other kinds of similar formats that are there. And you can go and learn about those formats say from a study package or from doing practice questions. But the single best way to get a sense for what are the different styles of the way that they ask and how to answer them is by doing a practice exam or two. When you do that, you'll become familiar with the ways that they ask questions and the ways that you need to answer the questions. The third advantage, which may be the biggest and most important one, is that you will expose your own holes. Each of these topics is hard and complicated and has some nuances. And when you begin to learn, we begin by understanding the basics, but there's going to be various ways they ask questions that expose our flaws. And you may find there's one or two or three topics that you really are weaker at than other topics. When we study, it's actually easier and more fun to study the topics we're good at, but it's less valuable for our time. If I want to get a better grade, I need to make sure I'm studying the topics that I don't get at all. And when you do a practice exam or even two or three, you will find that there's a couple of topics that you appreciate more and are better at, and some topics that you're worse at, and write those down. Your next stage in studying will be beginning to do practice questions and more study in those topics that you don't know. You could think about doing a practice exam as a diagnostic tool for your own physics understanding. And as you do a practice exam, you see, these are the topics I need to focus on in the rest of my study. The fourth advantage is that you will get a sense of the pacing and energy. The exam is 3 hours long, split into two halves, hour and a half, hour and a half. And it's quite different to do practice questions for 30 minutes in an hour than for 3 hours on one topic. I don't suggest you do all your study in a long 3-hour batch, but you need to feel what it's like to do the AP Physics practice exam in a sitting. So I suggest that you simulate the exam as closely as possible when you do a practice exam. So you should get the materials that are like the materials of a practice exam. You should have an exam, preferably a printed out practice exam. You should have some paper to write on, pencils, and a calculator, and nothing else. You should try and simulate an exam-like setting. You should have a table with nothing else on it and no distractions, no phone, and no one can talk to you. And you should simulate the time situation. So in the AP Physics exam, they have an hour and a half for the multiple choice questions, and they have an hour and 20 minutes, and then at the last 10 minutes they say there's a 10-minute warning left over. So you should set your phone or some timer for an hour and 20 minutes, and then 10 more minutes, and then take a break, and then do hour and 20 minutes for FRQ, and then 10 more minutes. Hey, even better than your phone, maybe you ask somebody like a parent or a friend to come and give you those timers. Simulating what the exam is like will give you a sense of how quickly you need to do questions, what it's like to skip questions and come back to them, and exam management techniques like that. So where can you get a practice exam? Unfortunately, the AP College Board has taken practice exams off their website. If you go to the AP College Board website, you will find there are the old FRQ questions. So you can look at the FRQ questions from the last 3 years on their website, and that is a really great resource, and I recommend you use that as part of your study. But that is not going to be a complete exam because the multiple choice questions are missing. Sadly, I have not found a good free resource that gives you a full AP Physics exam. So you're going to need to pay some money. However, the money is not too much. For about $20 or $30, you can get some of the best resources that have multiple practice exams, and I highly recommend you do so. The two best resources that I have found are the Barron's AP Physics Practice Book and the Princeton Review AP Physics Practice Book. The Princeton Review has many practice questions and 5 practice exams as part of it, and the Barron's has many questions for practice and then 4 practice exams as part of it. They're both available on Amazon, and they're about $25, $30, I think. There are other places that you can get practice exams. Flipping Physics has a packet that you can get on his website, and there's a practice exam included in his packet, and that would be worthwhile. And there's also 5 Steps to 5, and there's an AP Physics 1 version of that. And they have, and I think there's 2 practice exams as part of that package. So those resources don't cost too much money, and I really recommend you get at least one of them. When you buy a practice exam and a practice resource, please make sure you get something that is up to date. AP Physics has been changing the topics that are on the exam, and they recently added fluids, and that wasn't on there until the last year. So this 2026 exam should be the second year with fluids as part of it. So if you get a practice exam from 2024 or earlier, you will get something that isn't quite the same in the topics as what it'll be when you do your real exam. I recommend that you do your practice exam about 6 weeks in advance from the final. So AP Physics is in May. Spring break may be in March for you. So spring break would be a great chance to set aside 3-ish hours to do an AP Physics exam. When you do the exam, you should set aside 2 separate blocks of time. The first block of time is where you do the exam. 3 hours, maybe 3.5 hours with a half-hour break between the sections, so you can sit down and do that exam. A separate day, come back, and at least an hour, you want to work through your whole exam, grade the sucker, see what you got right, see what you got wrong, and read the solutions provided in your exam packet to see where you got things wrong. And this is going to be the next step towards you getting a best grade for you. The number one thing that you can do to improve your grade for the AP Physics exam is to do a practice exam. I highly recommend you set aside the time to have a full practice exam. A fun thing might be to do it with some friends. If you've got some friends in class, you might say, let's set aside this time together in spring break and do a practice exam together.